Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and in this episode, we're chatting with Alex Gertz from Hegemonic Project Games, producer of Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory, a 2 to 4 player asymmetric board game that simulates the economy and politics of an entire nation. Alex, welcome to the binge. How you doing?
Thank you for having me, James. I'm doing very good. Thank you.
Now, I got the name. I didn't mess it up. Wow. It's Hegemony.
Yes.
We had this talk just before we went on air.
Try.
I've been saying hegemony for, I think, my entire life. So my brain was having trouble just getting to the right pronunciation. But thank you for educating me on that. Alex, I'd start off. I'll mention, I know that we had told people that Varnavas was going to be on the podcast as well. He's come down with a cold.
Yes.
He's coughing like crazy. So we all agreed that it'd probably be best for the listeners.
Yes.
We didn't have a guest coughing nonstop into the mic. So you're going to have to champion on behalf of the entire team. First, can you tell me, so hegemony, what is hegemony? Like as a definition, what does this term mean?
Right. I mean, that's the most the question that gets also quite often overlooked, because people, like we encountered people so far that even thought that's just a fancy word we just choose out of the blue. Yeah. But actually the word itself, the meaning of the word or the concept behind the term has a lot to do with the game itself. I mean, hegemony in its initial concept meant just that domination of one ancient Greek city-state over another. That was like hegemony as a concept. And then over many hundred years, like the concept adapted, changed. It started to mean also like some kind of dominance some countries have over other countries in an international system. And then at one point, one theorist got the idea to actually apply the concept of hegemony also on a nation, not just in an international framework, but in a national framework. And he started to realize, or he proposed the idea that maybe there are many different social forces inside of a country which also fight for hegemony, therefore like some sort of ideological victory. Forces which try to make the other social forces believe that their path they choose for this nation is truly the best one. And I mean, that's where it also links with the game, because we have 4 social groups which fight for exactly this in the game, fight for their own ideology and try to convince the other players through different means that this is truly the best way to go.
So hegemony, before we get to the game, just because I want to kind of lock in on this concept a little bit. So it's this kind of the social construct where it's basically influence, right? It's one group controlling others through influence. Yes. I literally just came across this past week. My daughter is actually doing a project in school where they're talking about here in Canada and the indigenous population and how they've been marginalized, quite frankly, for hundreds of years, and assimilated into European culture and a lot of really atrocities, right, that happen in the country here. And this term social hegemony came out, or hegemony, I guess is the term. So it's kind of funny that I had this podcast come up with you guys while at the same time talking with one of my kids about a social project in her sociology course, which is kind of cool. Your team is very large and it's full of a lot of educators. Can you kind of talk to me about like who's on the team? Who are all these people? Like there's a lot of profs on this list, right? Like, yeah.
Yes. I mean, the profs were mostly there for the academic underlying of the game, because of course we wanted to make a game that was fun first and foremost, but we wanted to make a game as some sort of educational project. And for that, we needed professors which know this sphere we were trying to make a project on. Actually, Varnavas Timotheou, the founder, who's like unfortunately not here today because of the cold, he himself also studied international politics and global political economy in his master's, global political economy. Coincidentally, I actually studied the same, not at the same university, completely in a completely different part of the globe. But I think it was like this kind of, we had this academic interest to actually create a project which wouldn't just be fun, but also would manage to educate people. On top of that, we obviously have like some game designers, which make sure that the gameplay is smooth and nice, and like that all these ideas we have in our mind from the gameplay side, they also kind of can manifest. And other than that, yes, as you said, we also have a team of academics. I mean, we're 4 to 5 people basically. My job, I'm supposed to be some kind of standing between the chairs of academia and like gameplay, and try to make sure that it all comes together. Other than that, like the 2 game designers are Varnavas Timotheou on the one side and Vangelis Bagliatellis on the other side, who's like the board game veteran in our team, because he also himself made, I think, quite a lot of board games at this point.
So how did they meet? Like, how did you guys all meet? I guess is what I'm trying to get to. Like, what's the history of your team?
Right. I mean, it all started in Varnavas' head. Like, he had this vision to create a board game about all the stuff he's been learning at university. And then first his vision was to make an educational project that would be fun. And then the second step was that he realized, I think a board game would be the best way to do that, because that way, not just people interact with the knowledge or with the topic at hand, but they also interact with each other while doing that, which is quite often, I mean, in the board game community, that's fun, obviously. So a board game was a really good medium to choose. And then he and Vangelis actually met in a board game conference. It was some kind of game designers conference, actually. Varnavas only told me once. I'm myself, like the team exists for 3 years already. I'm part for 1.5 years. And from that point, actually, all the academics that started to join all had like the similar story like me. We all stumbled upon this project completely randomly through like online positions, which were advertised. And all of us had this moment in their academic career where they were like, damn, I wish I could make like something cool out of this knowledge, maybe something like a board game that would be really nice.
Yeah.
And that was like the one moment all of us shared, basically, which all led us to this project. Although we're completely different ages. I myself also the youngest team member, which also was like quite a fun story. Varnavas was actually looking for somebody who's like a bit further in the academic career, which, well, I'm just 25 now. I don't have a PhD yet. But it was my strong enthusiasm for the project, because I wrote in like 2 pages full of text, like, oh my God, this is amazing. I need to be part of it. I was always dreaming about like a political economic board game. It was my enthusiasm which actually managed to convince him. And then I became a part of the team, so to speak.
How long were you guys working on this? Yeah. Like, how long? Because this is a very, and we'll get into the game again in a couple moments here, but it's a very big game, right? With a lot of stuff going on. And when usually those are not quick development cycles for games like that. It's usually quite some time. When did this kind of this whole idea germinate? Like, how long ago was that? And when did it, like when Varnavas connected with Vangelis, Vangelis obviously understands how to do board games and so forth, but at what point did that process start, where Varnavas is like, okay, I got this idea of a teaching tool, maybe I can turn it into a game, let me connect with this guy over here and start actually putting pen to paper. How long ago was that?
Yeah, I mean, initially the idea arose like 3 years ago in Varnavas' head, so to speak. And then like 2.5 years ago, he and Vangelis met. That was like the seed that has been planted for like the project itself, like in its physical form. And since 2 years, it started to take on rapid, like the pace started to become faster. Well, and 1.5 years when I joined in, actually, like the game itself was already in its like the 3rd, 4th prototype of now. Like we have a lot of prototypes at this point, because we always had to redevelop, rebalance everything. It's an asymmetric game. It's a huge Euro game, as you said. It's supposed to be a complete simulation of a nation, so we often had to look what to incorporate, maybe what to throw out, because it would make the game too complex. But when I joined 1.5 years ago, like the prototype was already standing, and since then, like the last 1.5 years, we have been constantly refining it until we got to the point where we're like, okay, finally, I think that's it. Like we hit the sweet spot between all of these goals and ideas we had for this game.
It's still a fairly fast turnaround, right? Like 2.5 years that's quick for a game like this. I'm actually surprised to hear that. And is it your team members are in different countries as well? Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, at this point we have team members from, I think, like 7 countries. which also was a major part that, in this fast pace, actually, because all of us hooked on to this project because we immediately felt that it's a passion project. And if like so many people get together and all of them have the feeling it's a passion project, it's accelerates the speed up. Like me for myself, I'm still, but even.
I think we might have partially lost you there, Alex.
Okay.
You back? All right, we'll give it a minute. It seems like Alex has got some internet issues. He is cutting out. But what I think he was saying, just as before he went kind of dark there, was that this is several different countries that this is run in with the passion. Are you back now, Alex?
Yes.
Oh, there you
yes.
are. So across multiple countries, which is cool. So is it in a digital format then? Like, is it tabletop simulator? Because I got to think when you have all these different people, different countries, print and play or shipping prototypes all around would probably not be that practical. So was TTS kind of the solution for you guys, or?
Tabletopia, like, yes,
Okay.
It was Tabletopia, which is, I mean, otherwise it wouldn't have been possible to do that, obviously. And yeah, it actually also different parts of the team only had to interact very intensely over the course of the whole time in Tabletopia. Like the other part of the team, like the academics, they were there to just provide like the theoretical underlying. It was like the job of the other part of the team to really make sure that it works gameplay wise.
Got it. So I'm going to share my screen for people that are watching, and maybe you can walk us through. You can't see it obviously because this is an overlay, but maybe you can talk to the game. First of all, just say at the top, you guys have already hit, I'm going to put this in Canadian dollars because it's always larger, $600 and almost $77,000 you guys have hit already, 8,241 backers, still 13 days to go. That is a very, very strong campaign, and you know, I'm sure you guys are looking at that $1 million mark thinking, you know, are we going to hit it? And, you know, it's possible, right? You get the hockey stick in the back 48 hours. And certainly there's a lot of good press around this game. I'm seeing a lot of great reviews, pretty consistent, quite frankly, across the board when people are talking about how big and wide spanning this game is, yet how cool it is that it covers off this topic, right? And how well this engine kind of works amongst itself. So walk us through the essence of how you play this game.
Okay, the essence goes as follows. Basically, the big board in the middle of it all, that's supposed to be a nation, a contemporary unnamed nation. It's supposed to be specifically the political sphere of that nation as well as the economy. The political sphere is more like in the upper 1/3 of the board. The economy is in the lower 2/3. And the board obviously is going to be the place where all of the up to 4 players in the role of 4 different classes interact with each other. We have the working class, the middle class, the capitalist class, and the state. Obviously, as I think it already implies that the game is very asymmetric. Obviously, all the classes have completely different goals. The working class and the capitalist class play against each other in a 2-player game. In a 3-player game, the middle class joins. In a 4-player game, the state joins. However, the state is usually also present in 2- and 3-player games as some kind of simulation. While now we are also actually working on automas to make sure that, well, you can play everything in any type of constellation.
So will there be like a 1-player version then, where you could technically have an automa deck for the other three classes, or?
Yes. We're gonna have so far automas for the working class, the middle class, and the capitalist class. So you would be able to play as the state in a solo mode. So that's currently where we are with that. And apart from the solo mode, like 2 to 4 player can interact with each other on this board. All of them obviously also have their own small player board where like all the action happens, which gonna bring them victory points. And over the course of the game, the players have like completely different ways to interact with each other. They can focus on the economical part of it all, where capitalists, for example, can construct their own companies. The working class can work at these companies. The state also has its own companies, the public sector. And the middle class is also has its companies, but also has its employees, since it's situated in the middle of society. It consists a bit of both business owners, employees alike. So they interact with each other economically, but also politically, because as I mentioned before, in the upper 1/3 of the board, there is like the so-called the parliament, which we have. It consists of 7 different policies, and these policies can be changed by the players. And at the same time, these policies have very strong effects for also the economic part of or for like the whole nation, actually.
So just so I'm clear on this, because I want to kind of dive into that a little bit. So there's 7 different policies that are in play at a given time.
Yes, they're all in play at a given time, and they all vary. They can have 3 different configurations. So all of these policies, policy 1 to 5, they can switch from a more socialist stance towards a more neoliberal stance or something in the middle. Policy 6 and 7 from a more nationalist stance to a more globalist stance.
How many iterations is there, or how many combinations can you do of these different policies?
I mean, a lot. A lot.
Dozens, yeah.
Dozens more even. Like I have not, in all the playthroughs I've done so far, I'm pretty sure I've not seen all the combinations there are, which is also something that creates a lot of replayability value, because there's so many different mixtures which have completely different effects. Some of them kind of don't work out in the long run, but that's also something the players are supposed to learn. If, for example, just like a very obvious example, if you have very low taxation, nobody pays taxes. At the same time, there's free healthcare, there's free education, there's a huge public sector with like a lot of companies. That's not going to go well for a long time, and that's something the players at one point are going to realize, because we can see that also in real life as well. That's not how it can work economically.
So in this game, you're simulating this nation. So you're producing goods, right? For some, I guess,
yes.
You know, factories and so forth, you're producing goods.
Mm-hmm.
You're setting policies to impact the people, right?
Yes.
I think I even read somewhere you can even set like the wage rate and things like that, so you can decide whether
that's one of the policies.
Wages go up, and then there's taxes, right, to help pay for things. And then over top of all that, you're actually voting, right? So there's like, are you actually controlling the government, or are you more controlling the policies of the government?
The policies.
Okay.
It's supposed, like, the voting takes place for the policies, which the players themselves can also introduce.
Yeah.
And what I also maybe forgot to mention, the whole thing is card driven as such. Everybody has like a certain 8 action cards on their hand, and they come with their own class-based actions, which other classes obviously can't do, because they also can't do it in real life.
Yeah.
That's also the main driver. Some people also have said that we're a worker placement game, but that's not really what the game is, because once you place workers on certain companies, that's not what triggers the actions. What triggers the actions are your cards on your hands, and if you play them or if you discard them in order to trigger your class-specific basic actions. So about that.
And then, is there been any plans to try to seed this into an academic setting, like even in like secondary schools and so forth? Like, have you guys put any thought around? Because I mean, this seems like it could be a pretty good educational tool, right? It could really demonstrate some concepts. We'll get into the playtime in a second, but I mean, in a short period of time, you should be able to demonstrate some basic social economic concepts, right, to students. You know, I'm thinking even in high school. Is this something you guys have looked at as part of your kind of rollout plan, or?
I mean, that's something we definitely would love to make happen. I mean, we still, due to that, I mean, the game arose out of academia somehow, or there was like a big part of academia involved. And we're still having, therefore, also very strong links to academia.
Yeah.
So this kind of idea is still very much there. I mean, for myself, since I'm a student, I'm sure I'm gonna do it in my university as well. because that's something that would the students which studied global political economy with me, they would love that for sure. And other than that, we were also contacted by some teachers which said that they would love to do that with their students.
Yeah.
Which I think is absolutely amazing. So let's hope that we can continue in that direction. I would love that. I mean, first I was thinking, okay, it's a more heavy Euro game. I don't know if that's something that so many people would be interested in. But then again, I thought that before the Kickstarter, I was not even expecting this kind of resonance. All of us were not expecting that. So
yeah.
I think we should look at more ways to bring it to the people, especially to students.
Yeah, it seems, I mean, it's a beefy game. There's no doubt about that. And from what I'm hearing is you're looking at like 45 minutes per player, right? Playtime.
Mm-hmm.
So this is easily 2-3 hour game, right? Maybe even a 4-hour game if you have 4 players. So it's a kind of game that you're probably going to play with other people that are interested in these kinds of concepts. If you're playing with your gaming group, if you're using it as a teaching tool, I think it's really cool how you're seeing the give and take of policies, right? And you know, I think sometimes in our school systems, you know, especially in the high schools, they'll talk about, and I know we just recently had an election here in Canada, and so it always, every time there's an election, then the high schools will try to educate the students on here's the topics that are being discussed, here's why these topics are being discussed. But it's almost missing that layer that this game gets to, which is you can't do everything, right? And so it's picking and choosing the ones that kind of keep the engine going, right? And you know, being able to actually to simulate that, I think, is something that's probably pretty powerful for anybody playing. Yeah.
And it's really cool that actually the community picked this idea up very fast, and they also started to think into that direction. So like in our BGG, we also have some threads going on where there were some conversations, or in the Kickstarter in the comments, where people were thinking about how to apply this game into a larger setting, like into a class setting, in the best case of like 20 to 30 people. Some other people have been mentioning ideas like just split them up in groups and like 5 students play one class, which also makes it less beefy. If like each player would be responsible for, each student would be responsible for one certain mechanism, or like a few of them. So that would be super cool. It's amazing that like the community picks it off very fast. I mean, even 3 days after the release, after our launch on Kickstarter, we had the first TTS, unofficial TTS mod, where I was like, I mean, that's insane. When did you find the time to do that? Like, it's crazy.
And then you furnished with a cease and desist. And there's can you talk about the expansion? There's like a mini expansion, I'm pretty sure I saw on your page here somewhere. Can you talk about that?
Yes. I mean, until this point, we basically already have 3 mini expansions, but 2 of them are like less intense than the third one. The first mini expansion, which also was a stretch goal, and the backers managed to unlock that very fast, much faster than we anticipated. The first one is called Hidden Agendas, which gives each class, as the name implies already, like a specific secret mission, which lets them generate more victory points, which is nice for them to have. The second one that's where like, actually the second one's more intense in the terms of, it's like a so-called crisis deck. When the state defaults in the game, usually the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, intervenes and changes the game up completely for everybody, just like it is in real life. I mean, then it comes and says, okay, if the state can't pay its debts anymore, we're gonna completely restructure the state financially, and we're gonna set the rules, which then happens in the game. But we also thought about that it would be really cool to make it even more realistic if we show all the different ways that could happen, all the different things that can happen when a state defaults on his debt. So we implemented like a crisis deck, which when the state defaults, one card gets opened, and then we can see maybe it's not necessarily a successful IMF intervention. Maybe it's like a partly successful one. Maybe it's even like a failed one. Maybe it's one that would lead to revolution, like the last drop, which lets the barrel spill. and all these kind of things, which can happen. Maybe like the state chooses like to follow some real life precedents, like the EU or the US or Japan, stuff like that, just for the players to bring in more flavor in that crisis period, if they wish to do that, to implement that into the core game. And the third, the third mini extension, that's the historical event.
I think we just lost you again.
That's only.
I think we just lost you, my friend. Might have to wait till his internet refreshes again. Now are you back? Yeah, you're still out. This is part of what we have when we're going live, folks, especially when you're dealing with somebody on the other side of the planet. Your internet's not always going to be seamless. So I do know that Alex will pop back in. Here he comes in now. There he is. So just very quickly on the mini expansion, you're saying that there's different add-ons, and is there ever a situation where you will set up scenarios? So you'll say, 1945, here's how basically what the structure of the country was, set all these settings in these places, now go. Like, will there ever be a situation like that? Lost your mic.
Hello, here we are again. Sorry about that.
So there will be a situation like
short answer. Yeah, short answer, yes. That's the third mini expansion we have. That's the historical events mode, which does exactly what you just said. So the players are gonna, instead of, so far we have 5 rounds in the game, and each round is like 4 to 10 years in the base game. 4 to 10 years. So obviously the players play through a contemporary nation. But we also have this history mode where then each player will play one round. Is going to be one era, one historical era, which also going to lead to completely different historical events. Each era is going to be a different event. The eras are like around 100 years, give or take. And then exactly what you just said, the players are going to be able to experience the effects, the socioeconomic effects of all sorts of different historical events onto the board. And yeah, we're going to throw them into, like, that's going to be like the push into the water. Like, that's how the nation looks like now. That's what just happened. Mm-hmm. Now go, as you just said. So yeah, we're really excited about that one as well.
Super cool. I think it was Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. that was talking about rounds and how if you want to reduce your play time, you can do less rounds or more rounds. How does that come into play?
I mean, it's absolutely realistic to do that based on what I just said, since like each round is supposed to be like 4 to 10 years.
Yeah.
I mean, the players are also free to decide, okay, we just played 20 years of the nation, let's say, and not 50 years. And let's just stop here. And that's like the state of things as they are right now to this moment. It's fair enough if people want to like just experience some kind of introductions, like get like a very soft introduction into the whole concept, because obviously like 5 rounds are going to take more time with 45 minutes per player. But I think the best experience is definitely going to arise when the players play the full 5 rounds, because since it's asymmetric, obviously everybody has completely different strategies, completely different ways to get victory points. After 5 rounds, like each class really had the chance to completely shine, depending on the play style, obviously, maybe not. But yeah.
Oh, that's cool. So for a Kickstarter that's hit these kind of numbers, can you talk to some of the marketing or some of the things that you have done as a team to try to get the word out on this? Like, has it been social media ads or just a lot of kind of pre-marketing, or what kind of got you to where you are right now? Obviously, other than having a great game.
Yes, I mean, it was a lot of social media advertising for sure. We also went into the direction that we realized that since the game itself is political, maybe it's going to be a board game which is not just interesting to the board game community, but also interesting to people interested in politics and economics. So obviously, since I was also like, I myself was on Reddit quite often on some kind of political threads, which were like a very interesting platform for discussions. Usually that's where I also got the idea, hey, let's just talk about the game I'm working on right now. It was not even like supposed to be promotional, but usually this kind of, when I opened the thread and just talked about it, this led to a huge positive resonance, because obviously in a political context, it's important. It's very interesting for people to get this idea of like a nation simulation, even if you don't have any history with board games or any kind of affinity, but maybe that changed for a few of these people, which would be also very cool, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. I do want to give a shout out to MOB Vanguard, who is the licensing agent that connected you to me. Michael has been just awesome helping us connect some guests here. So I want to give him a shout out for sure. Great group. Sure. And also if somebody wants to follow along, you guys still got 13 days to go, but it sounds like from an academic standpoint, there's going to be a lot of dialogue around this game, right? And as you go from now to when this game actually is finally kind of shipped and published, I'm sure there's going to be some more add-ons and more adjustments you guys are going to do along the way. How do people best follow that journey?
I mean, we definitely going to be still super active on our Kickstarter page. Obviously, even after the campaign ended, we're going to keep everybody updated about like the timeline we have so far for the next year. Then like the product should be already on the way to you. But due to the difficult times we're living in right now, things can happen, who knows what. So like we're obviously going to keep everybody informed on our Kickstarter updates. Other than that, we're also trying to be as active as possible on our social media accounts, be it on Facebook at Hegemony, the game. We also have our own Facebook group. We also have plans for a Discord server.
So for the Facebook group, so how do people find that? What's it called? It's called Hegemony the Game. Is that the name of the Facebook group? Hegemony
Leads Your Class to Victory, the board game. Yes, that's like the full title.
That's a long title, my friend.
True. But usually it should also be enough to just follow the Facebook page, Hegemony, Lead Your Class to Victory, because I usually just invite everybody into that group who's also interested in getting like more close to the project.
That's cool. It sounds like the kind of social media group where there's going to be a lot of dialogue, right? Where these are the kind of things that people like to talk about, right? And I think the challenge becomes, how do you talk about the political process without talking about politics? Because politics can be very polarizing and dividing and can literally turn families and friends against each other. What I always seek out is finding ways to how can you have a discussion, kind of pull yourself out of the parties and this kind of thing and talk about just the infrastructure and the system itself. And it sounds like a game like this could help with that, right? Because you're not talking about parties. You're just talking about the system, the infrastructure, and how different social classes interact, which I think is pretty cool. Alex, I just want to wish you all the best, you and your team, on this campaign. You guys are absolutely crushing it. You're doing fantastic. You must be very, very proud of what you've achieved so far.
Yes.
If anybody wants to check out this campaign, Hegemony, I'm going to say Hegemony, but Hegemony. I'll put the link in the show notes, both on the YouTube video as well as our audio podcast. If people want to go check it out, please do. The page is amazing. Artwork is fantastic. The videos are great. If you're into, social issues and even the political system, you would probably love this game. So once again, Alex, thanks again for coming on the podcast. You take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you for having me.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.